Growing up in my house, there was me and my older sister. My sister was about 3 years older than me, and so she got to do things that I wasn't allowed to do. She got to go into the city to hang out with her friends before I did. She got to spend time with people before I did. She was allowed to stay up late. She was allowed to watch things that I wasn't allowed to watch. And so growing up, I couldn't wait to be older. I couldn't wait till I got to that age where I was allowed to do all the things that she could do. But then because she was older than me, she was already doing new things. And that made me jealous of that too. And actually, I really distinctly remember one day telling my sister, one day I'll be older than you. I had this idea of this magical day was coming where our ages swapped, where all of a sudden I became the older brother and she became the younger sister. I was like Simba in The Lion King. Instead of singing, I just can't wait to be king, I was singing, I just can't wait to be older. But then I got a bit older and I realised that magical day never came. My sister is still 3 years older than me and probably still is able to do things that I'm not allowed to do. She still is that wee bit more mature than me and still that wee bit more sensible than me. She doesn't dye her hair all these weird colours. But that was just a fact of life. My sister was older than me and I had to understand that. And that wish for me to be older, now maybe I look at it the other way. I wish I was a little bit younger. You see, it's within us all, that desire to be older, to be seen as equal, to be respected, to have adults look at us as adults instead of looking at us as kids. Or instead of putting our views to one side going, that's just because they're children. That's just because they're young. You'll understand when you're older. Oh, I hate that phrase. That's one of the most annoying things. You'll understand when you're older. We just want to be full people. And we think that when we get older, we'll be full people. I want to take a minute of your day and I want us to look at somebody who waited until they were older and then waited a bit more and then waited a bit more to the borderline it was taking the mick. Abraham and Sarah, two of the most important names in the Old Testament, two of the foundations of Christianity, two of the foundations in Genesis, and through them the whole of Scripture is laid out. But Abraham and Sarah, they met and they got married and they lived together and they had a tent, because in those days that's what you did, you got a lovely tent. And they had a farm, they had animals, and they moved around to where the pastures were good for their animals. And they did this year after year after year. And no kids ever came along. They never had a child of their own. And in those days that was seen as strange. Because what you did was you grew up, you got married, you had kids. And Abraham and Sarah waited, and they waited, and they waited, and nothing happened. They continued to move. They continued to pitch their tent. They continued to farm, and nothing changed. Abraham and Sarah waited. And what did they do during this time? They had faith. They trusted and they hoped. They kept moving and they kept going and they kept living in the hope that one day something was going to happen. Just to show just how old they are, there's a great piece of scripture in Genesis that says about Abraham and Sarah were in their tent and some angels came to visit them. And Abraham went out and greeted them and they spoke for a little while. And the angel said to Abraham, we will come back next year in 1 year's time and your wife will have a child. And the next bit of scripture is fantastic. It says, Sarah laughed. Sarah actually burst out laughing in their faces because this seemed like such a ridiculous idea because she was so old. And that's just the truth of it. She was so old that she laughed in both their faces. She says, how can this be? My husband and I are so old and I am not with child. Well, the angels went away and Sarah discovered she was pregnant. And they had a baby. They had Isaac. And Abraham was told his descendants would number the stars in the sky, would number more than grain of sands on a beach. And Abraham at this point was an old man. In Hebrews it says he was, quote, nearly dead, which is a lovely way to say very old. So I'm sure there was a bit of Abraham that said, I've waited this long and you've promised me children to number the stars in the sky. How is this possible? You see, Abraham had Isaac. But then every child of God, every child who believes, every person who is a Christian, every person who accepts Jesus is a child of Abraham. And we number more than the stars in the sky, number more than grains of sand on a beach. Because for Abraham, it wasn't just a one child. It was a whole dynasty. It was a faith thing, not so much a physical thing. It says this in Hebrews. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave his home and head to another land. And even when he reached that land God promised him, he lived there by faith. Abraham was confidently looking forward to an eternal foundation, a city designed and built by God. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and too old. She believed that God would keep his promise, and so the whole nation, from this one man who was as good as dead, a nation with so many people that like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there's no way to count them. You see, they waited a lifetime. They waited a lifetime to see something that seemed impossible, something that seemed completely improbable, and something that seemed it could never be, to have descendants numbering the stars in the sky, but yet it is true. Their wait was not in vain. Their wait was not wasted, because God's promise has come true to them. So what does that mean for us today? That's a nice story, but how do we put it into our lives? Well, for you and me, maybe our wait seems a little bit impossible. Maybe like Abraham and Sarah, this is day number 52 of lockdown, 53 maybe. Maybe this feels impossible. The idea of another week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a 5-stage plan to get out of this just seems too much. That's in a practical sense. Maybe it feels impossible, but it is doable. We're doing it for good reasons. We're doing it for safety. We're doing it for hope for others, to look after people. Maybe we feel okay, but it's to make sure those who are vulnerable feel okay also. Or maybe we feel like it's an impossible wait because we're young. We feel like we can't make a difference in the world because we're just kids. We're just young people. We're just young adults. What difference can we make in the world? It says in 1 Timothy 4:12, don't let people look down on you because you're young, but instead set an example for all believers. That's a fantastic piece that Paul wrote to one of the young leaders in the church, where he said, don't let people look down on you. Don't let people put you aside and say, you're just a child. You're just a young person. You're just a young adult. You'll understand when you're older. Paul says, don't let them do that. Instead, turn around and say, no, I'm going to set an example. I'm going to be so much more than I could be. I'm going to be an example for all. When I was a child, I couldn't wait to be older. And the truth is, I missed a great opportunity. An opportunity to be everything a Christian should be to those who were around me. I missed a great opportunity to be Jesus' hands and Jesus' feet today, instead of wishing for tomorrow. Instead of hoping and waiting until I became that little bit older. I missed an opportunity today. So guys, that's my message for you today, and that's what I hope this week that you'll find an opportunity in, is as we wait, and as we're told to wait, and as in faith we wait as well, we don't miss the opportunities of today. And we don't put off till tomorrow the things we can do today. So instead, go and set an example for all believers. Have a really good week, guys, and I'll see you soon.